Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Mauricio Quintero, for the message for this week. Mauricio's message is on Lech, Lecha, and which means go to yourself, to your inner being. Einstein's famous quote says, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." Now, this portion tells the story of Noah, introduced in the previous portion in Bereshit 11:26. After he had lived 70 years, Terah had his sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. We also read in Bereshit 11 about Abram's ancestors, including Noach, Shem, and Eber. It also draws a parallel from an idea in the Talmud, in Baba Batra and in Genesis Rabbah, that in those days the world was governed by a powerful man named Nimrod, who was a descendant of Cush, son of Ham, and who founded various cities where Ur was located. According to Jewish tradition, Abram's father Terah held a prominent role as a priest of idols and a general in the army of this fearsome Nimrod. Although we don't have any historical or archaeological evidence to prove the Talmudic stories, the truth is that when Avram, now his name is Av, means father, and Ram means exalted. When Avram was an adult, according to tradition, he was 52 years old. He had a wife, and to his credit, material goods. He decided to leave Ur of the Chaldees, accompanied by his father Terah, as we read in Bereshit 11:31. It's interesting then to see that according to the Torah, the one who decided to leave Ur was Terah, although his purpose and his reasons are not stated. It simply describes Terah taking his two sons, who were alive at that time, Nahor and Abram. They were already adults. And the text tells us that they arrived at the city of Haran, which was near where Noah had descended from the ark, both cities being in modern-day Turkey. Haran, according to some scholars, means dry road or crossroads. If we combine these stories, it seems that Terah was longing to return to his origins, possibly fleeing the pain of having lost a son, or he wanted to go find his ancestors, Shem and Noah, in a spiritual search, or to find meaning in life. However, he remained midway between Ur and the land of Canaan. Something that we might overlook is the fact that Abram decided to obey his father, who he sees, in order to honor him, and that somehow this generated a merit that did not go unnoticed by God. Then 25 years passed between Bereshit 11:32 and Bereshit 12:1, when at the age of 75, God told Avram that the city of Haran was only temporary, not the end of the journey that the Eternal had planned for his life. Again, Abram leaves blindly because God tells him, "And go to the land that I will show you," in Bereshit 12:1. Of course, I can imagine the marital problems that this might have generated for Abram. First, he decided to leave with his father to an unknown place at the age of 52, with the pretext, "Sarai, my love, we're moving with my family to an unknown place." Can you see this first problem? So first, Abram, not knowing where his father was going, after spending 25 years in Haran, he goes again to his wife and says, "Sarita, my heart, listen, I heard the voice of God who told me, get out of here and go to a new place that I will show you. Will you come with me?" And then Sarai responds to him and asks, "And where will you take me?" Abram replies, "I don't know. He just told me that he'll show me the place on the way." Now, if I put myself in Abram's shoes, if it had been my wife who heard this dialogue, she would refuse to take on such an adventure and try to convince me that I'm not right in my head. Usually when we imagine this scenario, we tend to place Abram's faith on a pedestal. But I think we have to put Sarai's great faith on that pedestal, to trust her husband and accompany him, to trust that he had heard God's voice and decide to venture into the unknown. Personally, I think that if my father decided to leave home at this time in his life and head for an unknown place, I would hardly accompany him. But let's say that I do decide to follow him and settle in a new city for 25 years. I would think even harder about leaving this new city to start all over again at 75, because I would think about the cost and the wear and tear on my family. It would not be an easy task. I take my hat off to them, because making this type of decision implies two things. One, being sure that God spoke to me, and two, having a very intimate relationship with God, being able to differentiate his voice from mine or from others. Another very important lesson is that Abram captured the eternal voice in his mind, springing from the depths of his being, when he had not yet completed the covenant of circumcision from God, with God. This is very powerful. All the men from Adam to Abram were not circumcised. Judaism didn't exist yet. In fact, there was no clear monotheistic concept, which means one God. Rather, after the flood, the world had become idolatrous. Henotheistic, which is a devotion to a single primary God while accepting the existence and possible existence of other deities. And pantheism, which are many gods. This is a fundamental and powerful concept. We do not have to be circumcised to speak with the eternal. Any human being can speak to God, can serve God, fear God, walk in his paths, and love his neighbor. God does not have religious labels. In fact, he does not need any religion to exist. The only thing religion does is to generate rules and put patterns of thoughts in order. But what a joy, as Shemot 33:19 says, and I will give favor to whomever I do, and I will show mercy to whomever I show mercy. In this sense, Rabbi Shaul, or Rav Shaul, speaks to the Kehilat of Rome in chapter 9, verse 16. Therefore, the choice does not depend on human desire or effort, but on the mercy of God. And that is why the prophet Hosea receives divine inspiration when he writes in his book in chapter 2:25, and I will say to those people who are not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God, like Ruth did. I mean, what a joy. God is the God of everything created, the visible and the invisible. And no matter your origins, you can begin a relationship with him. Apparently, there's a contradiction between the story that Terah says that he is the one who leaves Ur and the call that Abram receives. While he studied very slowly, I remember what our Rabbi often explained to us. The Torah is not written chronologically, but rather according to its importance. If we read carefully, chapter 12:1 says, and the Lord said to Abram, it's broken up into five phrases. The first one, Lech Lecha, go away. Second, me'artzecha, from your land. Third, umimoledetecha, from your birthplace. Fourth, umibeit avicha, from your father's house. And 5, el haaretz asher arecha, to the land that I will show you. When we break down the text, an apparent contradiction is resolved. The beauty of this is that in a single sentence, divided into these 5 phrases that I just read, they summarize the message that Abraham had received and would take place over the next 75 years. The first phrase, Lech Lecha, means go within, search within yourself. There is divinity therein. The divine spark is within us. This applies to every human being. It is a universal law. Not all humans have that awareness that God is in our inner being. But Bereshit 2:7 is very simple. It says, "And the Lord God formed man from the dust of the earth and breathed the soul of life into his nostrils, and man became a living being." We all receive this breath of life at conception, and that makes the difference between a living body and an inert one. This breath of life is the divine breath that imparts to us consciousness. It is part of the eternal image placed within limited beings, and it is from there that the connection with the divine comes. Some might attribute it to the pituitary gland that receives these vibrations from ethereal senses. But we all become aware to a greater or lesser extent of the perception of divinity within us and outside of us. That's why Devarim 30:11 and 14 later say, "For this commandment that I command you this day is not hidden from you, nor is it far from you, but the word is very close to you. It's in your mouth and in your heart that you can obey it." Therefore, we must look within ourselves where God is and deepen our inner being to reconnect with the eternal. The second phrase, Me'artzecha, leave your homeland. This fits with the idea in the Talmud, which says that Abraham, at the time of his birth, was taken from his land to preserve his life in a cave since his death had been decreed by Nimrod, and that when he grew up, Abram searched for Noah and Shem, who expanded the consciousness of monotheism in him. Then he returned to his homeland when God told him to get out of your land. This captures the idea of leaving the land. How do we know there was a connection between Noah and Shem with Abram? It's simple. When Abraham was born, Noah was 892 years old. Shem was 390 years. When Abram died, Shem was still alive, and Noah died when Abram was 58 years old. The third phrase, Umi moleditecha, leave your birthplace. It seems that it is Abram who received and heard the voice of the Eternal to leave Ur. But the Torah is so protective to not leave Abram's father in a bad light that it gives merit to Terah for leaving Ur, placing Abram as a follower to Haran. However, from what it's written, it seems that Abram would not have moved if he had not previously heard the voice of the Eternal to go out and to have this conviction, confidence, and certainty that it was God who was moving them from place to place. Abram had to leave his supposed family in Ur. The fourth phrase was Umi beit avicha, leave your father's house. He received this message while his father was still alive, but he carried it out after his father had died. He was not punished for it, since he was honored by his elderly father so as not to be a cause of sadness or hasten his death. Even in this, we see the principle that the commandments are for the living. However, although he did not know where he would go, he knew that he had to separate from his brother Nahor at approximately 70 years old. since according to the opinions of our sages, his journey lasted between 3 to 5 years. The fifth phrase, El haaretz asher arecha, to the land where I will show you. It's obvious that as a man and head of his household, it's difficult to offer a nomadic lifestyle to a wife and to all those who followed him, and to his heir apparent at that time, Lot. Sometimes I question Lot's motives for following him, since it's clear that Lot and his possessions were one. He was attached to them, as we read in Bereshit 14:12. And they took Lot and his possessions, the son of Abram's brother. I agree with what Rabbi Eli Resnick wrote when he says, shouldn't the verse say, and they took Lot, son of Abram's brother, and his property? The answer is clear. The inheritance and Lot were the same. They were one. Lot means veil, and it seems that he had been blinded by material possessions, causing him to end up in a cave without his wife, with a daughter problem, and without anything material. On the other hand, we see that Abram left without knowing where he was going. As Hebrews 11:8 says, by emunah, which means faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, leaving for a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he left without knowing where he was going. I like the idea developed by Chabad that I read this week, where they say that Abraham was accustomed to acting for himself and doing what was right. But the blessing was not open to him until the moment he opened his voice, as I quote verbatim. From the moment he obeyed the voice, as I quote verbatim. This is the first time that God speaks directly to Abraham and orders him to do something. And Abram does so immediately, believing in God without question. In the other stories, Abraham did things on his own. A man's greatest blessing is to know his purpose. And this blessing was given to Abraham in 12:12 when he says, you will be a blessing. God blessed Abraham, and everything he blesses cannot be cursed. In the next verse, it says that God's command is that he will bless those who recognize that Abraham is a blessing and curse those who do not. We often try to obtain different results by repeating the same thing every day, following certain patterns of behavior and conduct, or following philosophies, cultures, or fashions. But this won't produce a change in our life, in our being. Following the death of Israel fad, or following the death to Israel fad, for example, or following anti-Semitic fads that defend those who curse and kill the Jews, will not produce blessings in our lives. We must open our eyes. We must act like Abraham, thinking differently and against the prevailing thought of his day. This is only achieved through the knowledge of God and his attributes through the study of the Torah. However, knowing what is written is not enough. We must also learn to relate to him, to speak with him daily, to meditate, and to shut our mouths and open our ears to the spiritual, and thus capture his voice. If we awaken this spiritual gift, we will see God in all situations of our daily life, in the good, in the apparent bad, in our neighbors, in creation, in the messages of life, and above all, in that inner voice that stops us from responding to him the way Abraham did. As the prophet Isaiah said in 6:8, Hineni, here I am, willing to believe and obey your eternal voice over cultures, fashions, ideas, patterns of behavior, and vain tendencies. By doing so, we will be an echad, a blessing to the people around us. Remember, what God has blessed, who can curse? Remember the words of the wicked Bilam in Bamidbar 23:8. How can I curse him whom God has not cursed? It is my prayer that we see ourselves as blessed by the Eternal. Let us not even dare to speak ill of ourselves, for God has already blessed us by the merits of our fathers and mothers. What we must decide to do is to obey with emunah, by believing, trusting in the Eternal, and stopping the repetition of fruitless actions and behaviors. And then we will be a blessing. Shabbat Shalom.